Disclaimer. Proud member of Rowling's army. Or I would be if she had one. Dan and Emma Granger had just got home from their practice when they received an unexpected visitor.
Pop. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Granger.
Dobby, Dan said in surprise. What are you doing here? Is there something wrong with Hermione?
Miss Hermione is fine, sir, Dobby said. I has a letter for you from Miss Hermione.
He held out a parchment envelope.
A letter? Oh, good. We were wondering why it was late, Emma said. But why did she send it with you? Why didn't she send an owl? Miss Hermione says she also sent an owl, Mrs. Granger. Also sent an owl? But why would...
She trailed off and opened the envelope. The letter was a long one, and she soon found it a surprising and then a truly disturbing one.
Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry this letter is late. I needed some extra time to decide how I wanted to do this and get the wording exactly right. I'm sending this letter with Dobby to deliver directly to you, and I also sent another letter by owl. If I timed it right, you should receive that one soon after this one. I wrote 2 letters because I needed to test something. I'm sorry if I just really misread you, but I thought a couple of things in your last letter didn't look right. And call me paranoid, but I'm worried that someone may be tampering with our post, namely Professor Umbridge. She's so deep into propaganda and political manipulation that I honestly wouldn't put it past her. I wrote the exact text of my other letter below. When it arrives, I want you to compare the two and send a letter back with Dobby telling me what you found. If they're identical, I'll quit worrying, and we can forget the whole thing. But if not, then it means our post is being tampered with, and we'll have to correspond exclusively through Dobby to make sure Umbridge doesn't find out something she shouldn't. Here's the correct letter. Dear Mom and Dad, if you've been reading the Daily Prophet, you'll know about Professor Umbridge being appointed as High Inquisitor by now. She's been given the power to inspect all the teachers to see how well they're teaching. I thought it was odd for her to be a teacher as well, so I asked her who got to inspect her classes, but she just said the ministry was handling it. She's inspected a few of the teachers so far, but I don't think she really found fault with any of them, except Professor Trelawney, the divination teacher. I pointed her to my complaints about Professor Snape, but I don't think that went anywhere, and Snape was really unhappy that I brought it up, so I think I need to let it go for now. I found out from Daphne Greenglass how the ministry is able to do all of this stuff when the school is supposed to be independent. Apparently, the ministry does the accreditation for all magical education, and they've been writing a bunch of new accreditation requirements with the educational decrees. It's the same system they used to force me to come back to Hogwarts this year. Unfortunately, Harry got another week of detention from Professor Umbridge for mouthing off about Professor Squirrel from first year. I'm sure you remember. His second week was just as bad as his first, plus the Quidditch captain was furious with him. And Professor McGonagall didn't show him any sympathy this time because he should have known better. Professor McGonagall did convince Professor Dumbledore to modify Harry's punishment, but Umbridge just got the ministry to pass another educational decree giving her the final say over punishments, and since the school bylaws still allow corporal punishment, there's nothing else we can do. Umbridge's classes aren't any better either. She even tried to suggest Rebecca Gamp was the one who really wrote our paper on Gamp's Law, and that as a Muggle-born I couldn't possibly have been done it. I wish there was something we could do about her, but with her ministry contacts, she's pretty much unassailable. I tried to reason with her about her curriculum, but she wouldn't hear anything against it. I'm worried the lack of practical component to the class will hurt everyone's owl marks, and a lot of the other students are starting to worry about the same thing. So aside from that large problem, most things are all right at Hogwarts. I talked to Cho to try to get her and Cedric back together. It seemed to work, but I don't know if it will last. Greengrass and Davis have been nice to me, and helpful, and I'm getting some clearer ideas for my next arithmancy paper. My other friends are doing as well as they can. Ginny's worried about Harry. He's been having nightmares lately, and he's really moody this year, even by his standards. Percy Weasley, who works at the ministry, sent Ron a letter saying how great Professor Umbridge is and suggesting he should cut ties with Harry. That was just awful. Luna's as cheerful as ever, and Fred and George can always find something to entertain themselves. They're still up to their usual mischief, but I think I've got them to tone down their worst excesses. Yes, I'm still getting enough sleep. It's not always easy, but it's worry more than overwork that's weighing on me now, and that's never caused much trouble for my sleep schedule before. Love from Hermione. Dan, I have a bad feeling about this, Emma said. She put the letter down, only for him to pick it up again and examine it closely. Yes, so do I, he said, trying to break down what was in there. She thinks someone's tampering with her post? I suppose it's possible if they're really trying to control the students, Emma mused. If they're doing questionable things and don't want it getting out, like corporal punishment, they still use that in the magical world? This year, at least. I think she would have mentioned it if they were using it regularly. I wonder what they're doing to Harry that has her so worried, though. Does it matter? I don't know, Dan mumbled. I feel like Hermione wouldn't get so worked up if it was just a paddling like they did in the old days. She makes it sound like they're caning Harry or something. But they wouldn't need to do that on multiple days for one offense, Emma pointed out. Right. That's what worries me. Since when do they do that for any corporal punishment? I feel like she's leaving out something important. It doesn't add up, like she always says. She could be leaving things out if she's worried about her letter being intercepted. We'll have to wait and see what the other letter says.
True to her word, Hermione's other letter did come that evening. Emma and her husband both had steady hands, but she found hers on the verge of shaking a little as she unrolled the parchment she took from the owl. They compared the letters side by side with bated breath. Both were written perfectly in Hermione's tidy script, but there were, indeed, differences.
I pointed her to my complaints about Professor Snape, but I don't think that went anywhere, and Snape was really unhappy that I brought it up, so I think I need to let it go for now.
Was changed to,
I pointed her to my complaints about Professor Snape, but I think he passed his inspection pretty well, so I think I can let it go.
And
his second week was just as bad as his first.
Was changed to,
he's really causing a lot of trouble for himself, and he's alienating all the more sensible students and teachers.
And
since the school bylaws still allow corporal punishment, there's nothing else we can do.
Was changed to,
she said Professor Dumbledore was showing favoritism and being too soft on him, letting him get away with his lies.
And, to top it off, the part about her questioning Hermione's authorship of her paper was omitted entirely. Okay, that's bad, Dan said.
And illegal, Emma agreed. I assume tampering with the post is illegal in the magical world, just like it is here.
Well, there's definitely something going on. It's not quite Orwell stuff, but it's getting close. It looks like they're trying to paint Hogwarts and this Umbridge woman in a better light, and suppress anything about them that make them look fishy.
That's what it looks like to me, too. Oh dear. Now I'm starting to worry about Hermione's last letter. Do you remember she said something about Harry's detentions being probably legal? What do you want to bet she originally wrote illegal?
Oh God, after seeing this I wouldn't put it past them.
Should we do something then?
What can we do, Emma? We can't go to our government, and it sounds like the corruption in theirs goes all the way to the top. I think all we can do is find a way to move to France by New Year's like we planned. Then we can at least get Hermione out of there.
I suppose. And in the meantime, we'll have to write her back right away.
It took Hermione a bit by surprise when Dobby reappeared to her late that night. And by more surprise when he handed her 2 pieces of parchment and 1 sheet of paper with writing on them.
Your parents is wanting you to have all of these, Miss Hermione, he said. Thank you, Dobby, she said, taking the letters. That'll be all for now. Yes, miss.
She read her parents' letter first. It was just as bad as she feared.
Dear Hermione, we're sorry to have to tell you you were right. Someone did tamper with your letter in transit. We've sent both of your letters back with Dobby so you can see for yourself.
Hermione stopped and looked at the other letters, finding the differences. As she'd suspected, Umbridge was changing or taking out the worst parts and trying to make herself and the school under her command look better.
Obviously, we think it's very disturbing and probably illegal that they're doing that, and if this Professor Umbridge is as bad as you say, it's probably her. It was a good idea to test it with Dobby. Now we know for sure, at least. You're right that from now on, anything we don't want the wrong people to know will have to go through him. If the Ministry is that corrupt, We know of a few things you've done that they could use against you. However, if they're watching you this closely, we think we should also continue to send each other decoy letters by owl, or else they might get suspicious that we've stopped writing to each other. Just the unimportant details of your social life and such. From Mum, try to think like a normal teenager. You'll figure it out. So now that we have secure correspondence, we want details. What was so bad about Harry's detentions? Did you get into some kind of trouble with Professor Snape? Are your boyfriend and his brother doing anything dangerous? Please keep us informed if you're in trouble. We might not be able to do anything just now, but we want to know whether you're all right. We're still working on moving to France by New Year's, and we don't think there will be any serious trouble with that, so all of this should be dealt with by spring term, for you at least. We know you want to help your friends, but it doesn't sound like there's much you can do right now. Love from Mum and Dad.
Well, that settled that. She'd have to write them again soon. She wasn't sure just yet how much she wanted to tell them about Harry's detentions. Would they do something rash if they knew the full depths of Umbridge's depravity? And she wasn't sure about telling them about the defense practices either. She was proud of herself for helping her friends more than her parents probably could have guessed, but they might not see it the same way. Hermione, Harry approached her on Friday night.
Yes?
I've been thinking about our defense group tomorrow.
What about it?
Well, you said we need a way to make sure nobody tells about it. And I was thinking about last year with the Goblet of Fire, and what if we had a magical contract?
A contract? She said in surprise. You really want to get into one of those again?
Well, I thought it would be a good idea. We've got to do something, right?
I didn't mean anything by it, Hermione said quickly. In fact, I'd thought of the idea myself. It's just that with your history, I didn't think you'd go for it.
Well, the Goblet of Fire caused a lot of trouble, sure, Harry replied. But I thought if we could control it and what it did, maybe it could work. It doesn't have to be just as bad. Just some kind of consequence to make people think twice about telling. Do you think you could do that?
Sure, Harry. You could probably do that if you had to.
Harry gave her an incredulous look. Okay, but I think you and Ron together could. I do think it's a good idea. How about I put something together tonight, and we'll tell the Weasleys to meet us early at the Room of Requirement so we can work out exactly what we want in it.
All right, sounds good. So Harry and I were thinking that we should use a binding magical contract to make sure nobody can tell anyone about the group unless we say so. Nothing really bad like the Goblet of Fire, just enough so they wouldn't do it. That could work, Ginny said. You're probably right about the rumors spreading too far too fast. So, what do you think the contract should do to them?
Ought to be something suitably nasty, George suggested. And public, added Fred, so we can see who told.
That's what I was thinking.
Hermione produced a second sheet of parchment with arcane runes and arithmetic diagrams written across it.
My idea was to give them the worst case of acne in the school.
Harry's and the Weasleys' eyes widened. Ginny paled a little.
Worse than Eloise Midgen? She said. It'll make her case look like a couple of cute freckles, and it'll spell sneak across their face.
They all stared at her in what she thought was a slightly exaggerated fashion.
Wow, Ginny said. That's even more devious than I thought. Well, I wanted to write traitor, but I wasn't sure if it would fit.
Ron chuckled and spoke up.
Well, I guess it's true. The female of the species is more deadly than the male.
Everyone silently turned to face him in astonishment.
Yes, I read a poem. Try not to faint. You know, that poem is really kind of sexist, Hermione told him.
Ron shrugged. It fits you pretty well, though.
Excuse me?
You do kind of have a vindictive streak, Hermione, George said hesitantly. Hermione automatically glared at him before she could catch herself.
My beautiful, brilliant girlfriend, who we're very glad turns that streak towards our deserving foes, he added.
Hermione rolled her eyes, but their words did make her second-guess herself a bit. Was she being too vindictive? She'd told herself she was just doing what she had to survive.
You don't think it's too much, do you?
I don't think so, Harry said. I think it's brilliant. We all know there's a war coming. We ought to be serious about it like we believe it.
All right, then, she said with relief. Everyone else? Yes? No? If what Umbridge did to Harry is any indication, she's going to fight just as dirty, Ginny said, having quickly recovered herself. I say yes.
Works for me, said Ron. A bit nastier than our usual fare, Fred began. But if they're smart, they won't do it, George continued. And if they're dumb, they'll deserve it, Fred finished.
Good. We'll go with the sneak,
Hermione said, combining her arithmetic parchment with the sign-up list.
So before we bring anyone else into the group, and especially before we show them the room, we make them sign the contract. I was thinking that we should make it so only Harry and I can talk about the group.
Why not us? The twins said at once. At least we didn't tell anyone, said Fred, looking at Ron. Yeah, because I said so, said George. Will you cut that out?
Ahem,
Hermione interrupted.
I was thinking it should be only two of us, because the more people who can talk, the greater the risk that someone we don't want to will hear about it. I also wrote the contract so we can change who has privileges later if we need to.
I can see that, George conceded.
I'm not crazy about it, but okay,
Ron said. They all soon agreed, and after making a few minor changes to the wording, they signed the contract just in time for their 4 new members to show up.
Whoa, what is this place?
Neville said in awe when they let him in. Luna, Dean, and Sally Ann looked around appreciatively.
It's called the Room of Requirement, Hermione explained. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it can take the form of whatever you need. This is where we practiced last week.
So we're really learning actual defense in here? Dean said. We're trying to, Harry told him. We've got all the books from when the classes were actually good, and we've got targets and stuff in here to practice on.
So how does it work, then?
Sally Ann asked.
First off, we need to swear you to secrecy, Hermione said in a businesslike tone. Umbridge doesn't want us learning real defense. If she found out we were doing this, it would be bad. I don't think you even know how bad.
She thought of Harry's detentions. As they'd feared, the lines had left a scar that read, I must not tell lies.
We wrote up a contract that says you won't tell anyone about this group without our say-so, or else. What's the or else? Sally Ann asked. Let's just say you'll be marked as a sneak for all to see. If there's someone you want to invite to join us, tell Harry or me, and we'll talk to them. Now, if all of you are okay with that...
The 4 newcomers read over the contract carefully, and signed it, and it looked like they were in good shape. Without further ado, Harry began the lesson. We're going to start with basic dueling skills, he told the group. There's a lot more to fighting than just dueling, but it's a good place to start. Do you all know the disarming charm? They nodded, although Dean questioned whether it was too basic to start on. Don't knock it until you're sure you can cast it, Harry said. And besides, I still used it against Voldemort last year. That convinced them, and they soon started casting. Unfortunately, the 4 newcomers were not as proficient as Harry, Hermione, or the Weasleys, many of whom had faced real foes before. Their aim wasn't as good, and they couldn't cast the spells as consistently. Neville's spells in particular were very weak at first, although he improved significantly with perseverance until he managed to disarm Harry. Luna put in great effort, but she wasn't a natural fighter, and her results were very patchy. Dean and Sally Ann weren't much better. Harry, however, got into his role again as he began wandering around and helping them correct what they were doing wrong, although he still wasn't entirely happy doing it alone. So you need to make sure your grip doesn't slip and make your wand line up wrong, and... Harry stopped in the middle of one explanation and turned to look at Hermione. Hermione, get up here, he demanded suddenly. Why should I do this on my own?
Excuse me?
You're the one who told me about the different wand grips, aren't you? You should explain it.
But you're the teacher, though, she protested.
And who says you're not a good teacher, too? You know more spells than I do. You were teaching me last year.
Oh, I know that. I was just trying to help your self-confidence.
Hermione came up and stood front and center beside Harry, showing them her wand.
"Each wand grips a little differently," she said, holding her own vinewood wand out for them to see. "My wand is thinner than average and doesn't have a well-defined handle, like most wands. Luna, I think yours is the one that's most like it. It's easiest for me to hold it like a pointer, and I need a little bit more precise grip because I can't close my whole fist comfortably around it. But even if you can with yours, it's a bit ham-handed. It can work, Ron makes it work, but it won't be the most accurate way of casting for most of you. You need a good range of movement to really get the wand movements down."
Hermione had never paid much attention to how different people held their wands until this year. There were a few universals of wand handling and a few precision spells that needed a particular grip, but for the most part, Professor Flitwick had taught them to find a grip that felt comfortable for them. Hermione always held her own wand the way a professor would hold a pointer. She had previously noticed that George used a tight sloth grip with just his fingers, while Fred used a very loose grip similar to a Muggle stage magician. It was funny to think how they were so similar, but their wand handling was so different. Now that she looked, Harry and Ginny both held their wands similar to herself, but Ron indeed held his in his closed fist like a rounder's bat. Predictably, Luna's grip was the oddest. She held her wand almost without using her thumb, gripping it between her fingers and her palm. There were a lot of variations among the group, but with a bit more explanation, Harry and Hermione worked together to help the others find the right grip. Much of this was revised in Charms class in first year, but Professor Flitwick never really did a refresher, so it was definitely relevant. In the end, all 10 of them finished up the lesson feeling distinctly more confident. "You see, I think you're a pretty good teacher too, Hermione," Harry told her.
"I suppose," she agreed. "I don't think it's my calling, but I can definitely help. So," she told the group, "before we go, 2 things. First, Harry and I have our ways of knowing where Umbridge and the other patrols are, but I think we still shouldn't leave all at once. Maybe 3 at a time so we don't attract unwanted attention. And second, we need a list of people we want to invite to the group. I'm talking about people we trust and who would be interested in joining." She already had Parvati, the Creevy brothers, the rest of the Quidditch team, and Lee listed, so that was mostly covered. No one listed anyone new except Neville, who said, "I think maybe we should ask Susan Bones from Hufflepuff." "You know her?" Hermione asked. "Yeah, from herbology. She's really upset about Umbridge's class."
"Is she related to Amelia Bones?" Harry asked.
She's her niece."
"That could be good if she'll sign the contract," Harry said. "Amelia Bones was the one who took my side at the trial."
"She's also the director of magical law enforcement," Neville said.
That didn't sound so good to Hermione, even if she was on Harry's side.
"Do we trust her?" she asked. "I know she's no friend of Fudge," Neville said. "She always complains about Fudge cutting our funding and stuff." "All right, then. I guess I'll approach her. Tell Harry or me if you think of anyone else. That'll put us at 18 if everyone shows, so we'll have plenty of people." "Hey, do you think we can do Friday night for the next meeting?" Ron asked. "Saturday's a Hogsmeade day. Everyone will be tired out."
"Good point," Harry said. "Any problems with Friday?" No one objected, but Ginny said,
"Friday's fine, but maybe we should have a secret way of telling each other when meetings are, so we can reschedule if we need to." "Maybe," Hermione said. "I'll think about it. Any more business?" No one spoke. "Meeting adjourned."
The recruiting went surprisingly well. Apparently, a lot of people shared her concerns about passing their exams, and/or about Voldemort, and everyone she and Harry approached signed the contract. At least, once they were informed Harry was teaching. Even the prefects, Parvati and Angelina, were eager to join. It was hero worship, sure, but it did work to their advantage. She did have to tell little Dennis Creevy that he might not be able to do the more advanced spells, but the basics they were currently learning would definitely be useful to him. Hermione approached the last person on her list on Thursday after herbology. She'd had a passing acquaintance with the girl in her early years, and, embarrassingly, they had crushed on Gilderoy Lockhart together in second year, but they hadn't spoken to each other in over a year. Still, Harry didn't even know what she looked like. Boys. So Hermione was the one to approach her.
"Excuse me," she said. "It's Susan Bones, right?"
Susan looked up and smiled.
"Oh, right, Hermione. Wow, it's been a while, hasn't it?" "Uh-huh. Listen, I just wanted to talk to you because I heard your aunt is the director of magical law enforcement."
Hermione was amazed by how quickly Susan turned stiff and guarded. She could guess that her aunt was on the defensive a lot lately, both politically and physically, if she believed the truth.
"Yes, what do you want?"
she said.
"I just want to talk and maybe make an offer." "If you want to talk to Aunt Amelia, you'll have to do it yourself."
Susan turned up her nose and started to walk away.
"Susan, wait!"
Hermione stopped her. She could see how her words could be misconstrued.
"That's not what I meant. This really isn't even about your aunt at all. I just mentioned it because I thought it was more likely that you and she believe Harry. You know, about Voldemort."
Susan flinched, but she started to relax as the words sank in.
"Sort of. It's more like Fudge is acting shiftier than usual, and Aunt Amelia doesn't trust him as far as she can throw him," she corrected. "Okay then, but do you believe Harry?"
Hermione said.
"No, wait, that isn't really that important. The real question is, what do you think of Umbridge's teaching?"
And boy, did that get Susan talking. Hermione was treated to a lengthy rant about how Umbridge was awful, and everyone was going to flunk their owls and be unprepared to defend themselves in daily life, let alone go into the Auror Corps, and how Aunt Amelia had had a row about it with Fudge, but she couldn't do much about it because she was trying to keep her job. Hermione stared in silence for a minute when she finally wound down.
"Right. Susan, what would you say if there was a group of students getting together to learn real defense and not the drivel Umbridge teaches?"
Susan's eyes widened.
"Why haven't I heard about this?" she demanded. "Because it's being kept secret because Umbridge definitely wouldn't approve." "Oh, right, I should have thought of that. So, a secret defense club? How does that work?"
Hermione was whispering now.
"We use the old textbooks from when Professor Lupin taught here. Harry and I teach, and we do a lot of practical drills. What do you think?" "Harry's teaching?" Susan gasped. "You mean the actual Harry Potter?" "Do you know any other Harrys?" "No, but I mean, is it true he can cast a corporal patronus?" "Oh, sure. Actually, we both can." "No way!" she gasped. "It's true. Professor Lupin taught us." "No way!" Susan repeated.
Hermione grinned, looked around, and pulled her into the nearest empty classroom, where she produced her wand.
"Expecto Patronum!"
she cast, and her glowing silver otter appeared.
"No way!" Susan said again. "Aunt Amelia says not even all the Aurors can do that."
Privately, Hermione suspected quite a few Aurors didn't have the sense to practice that spell daily if they weren't on Azkaban duty. She still did at school because she didn't ever want it to get rusty.
"So what do you say?"
she asked.
"Sign me up. When is it?" "Well, that's the complicated part. We really want to keep this secret, so we're asking everyone who joins to sign a contract not to talk about it outside the group. Harry and I are the only allowed recruiters, too." "A contract?" Susan said nervously.
With her close association with the Ministry, she probably knew the uses and dangers of magical contracts better than most.
"Would I be able to read it?" "Yes, I have it here."
Hermione handed over the parchment for Susan to look over. The Hufflepuff girl read the whole thing carefully, twice.
"Uh-huh, not bad," she muttered to herself. "Uses the word willingly, that's good." She looked up. "What happens if I break it?" "It won't be good for your complexion, and we'll all know you told."
Hermione had left the consequences intentionally vague whenever one of her recruits asked, in the hopes that their imagination would dream up something really horrible that would keep them in check better. Maybe not the best policy, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Susan looked over the contract once more to make sure she hadn't missed anything, and she gasped when she noticed the list of names.
"That many people believe Harry?"
she said in amazement.
"I'm not sure they all believe Harry, but they're all willing to go against Umbridge."
Susan took a deep breath and said,
"Okay, I'm in."
She signed her name.
"So when's the meeting?" Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, 7th floor, by the tapestry of the dancing trolls. Great, I'll be there. Oh, but do you think you could recruit a few more people?
Hermione took a calming breath and nodded.
Who were you thinking of? My friend Hannah, and Cedric and Cho. Cedric and Cho! I can't believe I didn't think of them.
The next night, the Secret Defense Club assembled in the room of requirement 21 strong, including the head boy, and they were hanging on Harry's every word. With all the new people, the reaction was much stronger when Harry mentioned Voldemort's name, and quite a few more of them were only there for tutoring purposes, or to see if all the rumors about Harry were true. But they all stayed for Harry's and Hermione's lesson, which moved a little faster this time, but still began with the disarming charm. But since the group was unlikely to grow a whole lot more soon, they would be able to move on from there.
Just remember, Harry said at the end, this isn't just about passing our owls and newts. This thing will help you get there, but the really important thing is to learn to defend ourselves from Voldemort. The Ministry is no help. They're in complete denial. And they sent us the worst teacher ever, Hannah Abbott spoke up. She's doing everything she can to stop us using defensive spells. We think, Hermione said solemnly, that Fudge thinks Dumbledore's after his job, and Umbridge has some mad idea that Dumbledore's going to use the students here at Hogwarts as a private army.
Which was uncomfortably close to the truth, considering how many Order of Phoenix members Dumbledore had recruited straight out of Hogwarts. But they weren't aimed at the Ministry. Nearly everyone looked stunned at this revelation, except for Luna, who said something about Fudge having an army of heliopaths. But Hermione shushed her before they could get off track.
So we're on our own here, she said. We have to prepare ourselves because nobody else will. Now, we might have to move the meeting times around to accommodate Quidditch practices and the like, so I made these.
She handed out 21 fake gallons, similar to the ones she had made for communication between herself and Harry last year.
They look like real gallons, enough to fool a casual search, but they're not, really. Look at the lettering on the edges. I've put a protean charm on them, she said, to general astonishment. I learnt it while I was helping Harry last year. This way, we'll be able to send a message to the whole group about when we're holding a meeting of... We really need a name for this group, don't we?
That led to a lively discussion. After toying with a few names, Ginny suggested the D.A., short for Dumbledore's Army, since that was what Umbridge was afraid of. Hermione wasn't sure that was the wisest choice, but to her surprise, a majority of the group went with it. So she wrote the name at the top of the contract to make it official. Dumbledore's Army.